This thick jungle canopy offers many hiding places. No one knows all the animals that live beneath it.
It's believed that it's one of the spirits from our ancestor.
It's no surprise that they call it the Lost World.
This is the real-life Jurassic Park.
They're potentially extremely dangerous. Well, we've got a very good intelligence that these may be the Pterosaurs that, according to evolution, has been extinct for 70 million years or so.
Garth Guessman is Director of Field Research for Genesis Park, a research organization that works with local missionaries. Guessman believes that the creatures are pterodactyls, also known as pterosaurs.
When I found out that there was research going on in Papua New Guinea looking for these creatures, I was just amazed.
These animals are believed to have gone extinct along with the dinosaurs, something that Guessman is now questioning.
There's very good evidence that is indicating that they still are alive.
Then you have arrived. Whether you have a story to tell, an encounter you cannot explain, you have come to the right network. This is the Ropen Radio Network, and here is your host, Jacob S. Gira.
Thank you, Jordan Henricks. This is the Ropen Radio Network, broadcasting from Oregon's capital in Salem. Welcome, my fellow Oregonians, and YouTubers and Facebook people everywhere. You are always welcome here. Sighting report. I spoke with a man last week who strongly feels he saw a pterosaur in Indiana, Jefferson, Indiana to be exact. They were outside in their tents when they heard what they described as a stampede sound. Imagine that. The man looked to see what was outside, and there it was. He described to be 6 feet tall, almost humanoid looking. They tend to resemble that at first. Then he saw the head crest and the long beak. It was a pterosaur, I kid you not. That's what his words were. Rick, if you are listening and if you are comfortable sharing your sighting with all of us on the network, feel free to reach out to me again, and I'd love to get that scheduled so everybody can hear about this amazing sighting. All right. I believe there are 15 to 20 paleontologists, very small number, devoted to the study of pterosaurs. Dave Hone, David Martle, those guys come to mind. There's also a very small number of researchers in this world right now that have devoted their time and effort to just one cryptid. Dave Wetzel, Rex Yappy, Ken Gerhardt, Paul Nation, Jonathan Whitcomb, Bill Gibbons, and my guest today. Now, I have been following this gentleman for a while, ever since the early 2000s. Since that time, he has been involved with companies such as South Bay Science and field investigations for Genesis Park. He has explored remote tropical wilderness areas in Papua New Guinea twice. His first expedition was in late 2004 with a fellow American cryptozoologist, Dave Wetzel. He has been an ardent supporter of the concept of modern living pterosaurs over the years. He has interviewed many eyewitnesses and has had a few sightings of his own, having investigated and searched in promising areas. He was an important participant in the History Channel's Monster Quest, Flying Monsters episode expedition of 2009, appearing in the television broadcast with Paul Nation a few weeks later. And I just got the word he is online now. Let's go right now. Let's welcome in our guest. Well, welcome, Garth Guessman. It is a pleasure to have you here, and long overdue. And I'm glad to, and very excited to just have you be able to explain a lot of things here. We're going to go over quite a bit. But to start off, I want to make sure I have this correct. You are the vice president of South Bay Science?
That's a little old. I'm the president now.
I've
Okay.
evolved a little bit. No, just kidding.
Okay. And director of field research,
Presidents.
Genesis
Yeah.
Park as well?
With Genesis Park, I am the director of field research. Yeah. You able to hear okay?
I can hear you just fine. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. All right.
So, by the way, I can't get a hold of Will. I keep saying the wrong thing there. I can't get a hold of Jane,
Okay.
and I will work on maybe getting a hold of her a little later.
Okay, that's no problem. I also, before I start, I just want to say happy birthday to your wife, Coraline.
Yeah.
It was a few days ago, but I know I'm a little late, but still, special happy birthday to her.
Awesome.
So I know I mentioned this before, but it's important for the viewers to see this too. But you were one of the few people that helped push me in the right direction, and you probably didn't know that at the time. And our paths may have crossed once upon a time back in the early 2000s. It's a possibility. But very few people I can really associate with that one was Ken Gerhardt. The other one was Roy Mackle, after I read many books of his.
Really?
Yep. And then I came across you in the early 2000s, and it's interesting because I finally got to see you June 3rd of 2008, I believe, and that was on Monster Quest. Might have been 2009.
Gotcha. Yeah, 9.
Yeah. And then I finally realized that I was not alone here, because my first report of our subject today, Living Pterosaurs, and we're going to get into that, but the first report I ever had came in Washington State, and that was in the early 2000s. And just a quick little rundown on that.
I know where you're coming from. Yeah.
Yeah. A friend of mine who worked at the Oregon State Capitol messaged me and said, hey, I know a friend who has a family who lives in Washington, and she says she's seen some sort of strange creature out there that's flying around and has literally made a meal of her cats or her animals that live in the area. And they live in central Washington in the wooded area in the middle of nowhere. So I asked, hey, give me your number, give me the person's number, and I'll investigate. And for me, it was kind of a new thing, because before then, how I got introduced was I saw a movie in the theater back in the 80s about a living sauropod in the Congo. If anybody remembers this film, it's called Baby's Secret of the Lost Legend. And that really pushed me over. I was fascinated by that movie, but a lot of people thought it was weird. To me, it made complete sense. However, when I went and investigated this pterosaur thing, at first thing I was kind of reluctant, because I was like, they can't be alive still, but still I'll listen to this account. And I eventually did. About a year after that, the following special session, I said, hey, I didn't get that information. You never gave it to me. And I investigated, finally went out there, and to my surprise, she had no idea what a pterodactyl was. She just said, this is what it looks like. And it has no feathers, smooth skin, dangerous. It swoops down. It looks like some sort of reptile of some sort. And that's where it all just kind of, I was shocked by what she was saying. Then I showed her a picture. She's like, oh, yeah, that's kind of what I saw. I'm like, well, this is a dinosaur bird.
I was pretty impressed that she said that it was a reptile, bird-like thing that swooped down and tried to get her animals.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty amazing.
And she was very scared of it, because it just, during the summer months is when it would make its appearance, and she heard it, and it sounded like something quite exotic, I guess. She referenced something like a jungle monkey, which is like, I'm trying to picture that, although I know a lot of people are kind of trying to picture that too. But I get it. And the fact that she said it had no feathers, it's smooth skin, and it's large, and it has a tail, just blew my mind, until I showed her a picture of what I thought she may have seen. She's like, yeah, that's pretty close. Right. And again, I'm sure you're quite familiar with this, but there are a lot of reports of living ramphorhynchoids alive in Washington State, which is just
ramphorhynchoids.
Yeah. So of course that's what pushed me over. And then of course, when I saw you, I realized I wasn't alone, that something is actually happening here. I thought this was just once in a lifetime thing, but it actually turned into something more. So here we are.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, that Screech you were mentioning. Steve Sconce is a missionary and was in Papua New Guinea with his brother. They were in a real remote area, of Papua New Guinea, in the high area of one of the larger islands there. And one of the times, first of all, he saw the creatures multiple times flying over his head. And one of the times he heard it screeching. And this is how he described it. He said it sounds like scratching a chalkboard, but lower pitch.
Ah.
Lower pitch, but irritatingly, scratching that,
Oh gosh.
cringy noise, So that'll get your attention, right?
It sure will.
He didn't see it. He heard it, looked up, and his wife happened to be near him at that time. Her name is Crystal. He says, Crystal, look. And so she was an eyewitness at that point too. But he actually had 8 sightings in a year and a half while he was there.
Wow.
Literally building his home, learning the language. He was a civil missionary and working with the people, trying to understand them and their culture.
Yeah.
This is kind of that building time for this missionary. Untouched tribes is what they specialize in. And so that's why he had to kind of build it from the ground up.
Okay.
Anyway, 8 times in a year and a half. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. Almost like it was meant for him, It's like when you go out and go on adventures, you don't expect to see something. You go because you love just being out in the environment, exploring. But if you do see something, it's even that more special, which was a case that kind of happened for me. And I haven't had a chance to share this with Jonathan Whitcomb yet. But when I recently went out to the location where Peter Beach and Milt Marcy and him were at in Washington State. I got to tell you, that is the most creepiest area I've ever been as far as Washington State.
That's kind of a washed out area from that ice dam that broke in Montana and just washed out the area and made it rocky and craggy and nasty looking.
Yeah.
And you know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I stayed out there till the AM hours. But it was amazing just watching the wildlife, the many avian types, just swooping in and grabbing the many different variations of fish that are in that river. And there's up to 43 different variations. Yeah. So I didn't expect to see anything. I just wanted to be out there and film and be in that beautiful area. But then as I drove through Weber Canyon, that's where things changed. And I did not expect that. I remember praying about it, though. I said, oh, Lord, if this is your will, let me hear one or see one. And then as we're driving back, I've been told that they like to follow the lights. And then I felt a humongous swoop over the car, and I had the moon roof was open. It was about 98 degrees at night. It was killer. But then when it came through, that's when I heard the sound. That just made my hair stand up. And that's what was pretty shocking. Could I tell what it was? No, it was just too dark. But I feel like I had an experience there because it was too big. And what's nocturnal that's going to be that size? And it's not a heron.
Hey, did you say you heard this thing over your car noise while you were driving?
That's correct.
And how fast were you going? Like 3-way speed?
No. I think I was probably going about 25, 30 miles an hour top.
Okay, so you're going relatively slow.
Yeah.
And it was dark. There was no other noise around.
That's correct.
Okay, I see that. Because that would be quite a bit. I mean, those things are fairly loud, but over road noise, that would be amazing to hear.
Yeah.
I don't think you could hear it over freeway road noise.
Right. I mean, the fact is that we were the only vehicle going through the canyon. It's a very, very isolated canyon, very spooky at night too, especially in the AM, because you really need to wait for 2 a.m., 3 a.m. for these things to really make themselves known if they're in the area.
Okay, this is about 5 minutes. We placed the screeches of about a minute apart or so, and this was to be put out in the field to help attract them. And honestly, we don't know if it's going to scare them away or attract them. We were just trying.
Sure.
So here it is. To me, they sound a lot like owls.
Okay.
But I almost wonder if these creatures imitate things, and I can get into why I believe that more. It's not just a flippant hypothesis I have.
Yeah.
That these creatures imitate the sounds of others around them. But anyway, here we go. And by the way, when when Destination Truth went over there and filmed the Ropen lights
I remember that.
at Salamoa with Pastor Jacob Keepus, I'm sure I'm the only guy that knew what to pay attention for, but I heard a single screech when they were getting boisterous about, hey, did you see that? Hey, what's on the camera? Remember that?
I do remember that, yeah.
You have to listen for it. You have to turn your volume up. There is a screech in the background.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's play this, and here we go. Oh, do I have to turn stuff up? I think I'm okay. Now, you're hearing a lot of ambient noise around it.
Sure.
Along with the screech. Could you hear that?
I did.
Okay.
It was a little faint, but I could hear it.
Yeah, it was faint. And it's unfortunate we don't have the top-notch recording device. This was just off of our video camera that we left rolling all night.
Mm-hmm.
So here it comes again.
Okay.
I thought there were about 4 of them on here. I can back it up a little bit. I kind of looped it there for you. Let me see if I could just skip ahead. That was loud. That one was actually getting closer as it was screeching, so it got louder.
Okay.
Were you able to hear that okay?
I did, yeah.
And I'm searching for the next one.
Okay. Fascinating.
Yeah. It must have been a really short one because I might have. You just get this raspy crying noise, like a hawk or an owl.
Yeah.
But a little raspier, a little angrier sounding. And what I hear, I've heard people that know the difference between both, and they say that an owl has a trill that descends at the end.
Okay. Interesting.
In pitch. So anyway, you wanted to know about sounds. That's the best I got.
Okay, well that's good. That's a start because for a long time I've been hearing about these sounds, and I've only heard just a few. So that just puts it in more perspective for me and gives me more information. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Now
I don't want to get sidetracked, but please, if you want to hear more about sounds, ask me about the way they can imitate things.
Okay, I'm going to write that down.
If we have time.
Okay, we have a lot we're going to go through, so.
Totally bizarre.
Yeah, it is. So it just means that maybe the sound that I heard, it could have been one of them, and it may not have been, but I think there's a good solid chance it may have been because they've been seen in the area like crazy.
Matthew Spites, have you heard the name?
I've heard that name before.
Yeah, he's one of our researchers that stayed with us about, I can't remember, 3 years or so. Did some serious field research with us. And he was in Papua New Guinea near the town of Wau when he first heard about pterosaurs possibly living in the area. So he was asking Jim Bloom, the missionary there, about, going and check these things out. Anyway, they have a pterosaur there that has a particular vocalization. I wish I could remember what it is. And it sounded kind of like a word, like waboo, whatever. I can't think of a good word. And would make this sound. It sounded kind of like a word. So that's what they call that particular species there.
Interesting.
They might vocalize completely different in various locations.
Yeah. I mean, is it possible?
So I did hear a very, very similar screech in vastly distant locations when I heard that Monster Quest screech. So that screech kind of maybe is their universal. Maybe it's because owls come out at night and they're the big vocalizers and they imitate them most. I don't know.
That's a possibility. I wouldn't see why not. That's it kind of reminds me of the parrots and how they're able to speak and or how able to
Yes.
imitate. That's an
And
avian type.
mockingbirds.
Right.
Yeah, minor birds and mockingbirds do that too. They get their repertoire of the sounds around them. And then there's that Australian crazy mimicking bird. I wish I could remember the name of it. That imitates things to the T, like motors starting up on a car, like chainsaws, guy doing a video game, and they will imitate all that stuff.
Yeah.
To a T.
That's not a cockatoo, is it? No.
No, it's kind of a large pigeon-like
Okay.
creature. But yeah, I got to check it out.
Fascinating, because all these things it's amazing when you dive into this, you start to think, what else are we missing? Because you can learn a lot from bones, but there's only so much they can also tell you as well, which is what you put an eloquent point on from Monster Quest. I remember that. Before we go any further, though, just tell me real quickly what got you started. How did this come to be for you?
Well, in general, when I came to the Lord, I was generally theoretically, I could see, evolution was taught. I didn't see a contradiction to it. I didn't hear anybody saying it was wrong. So I just kind of accepted it just because of that. This is elementary to about junior high. And then I heard some challenges after I started to go to church. And in 10th grade, I had a profound experience with the Lord, and he really touched my heart. And I really delved into the Bible. I could never get over the fact that I sin and God's holy and he doesn't like that. And I struggled with that. And believe me, this directly relates to pterosaurs down the line. Just be patient with me.
No problem.
The fact that you have guilt over sin and you have shame for it, Christ came to deal with that specifically. He paid the price on the cross for our sins that we are guilty of, that we need to pay. But he was merciful. And as the judge, he took off his royal judge robe and put on humanity and died for our sins so that we can have his righteousness.
Amen.
I finally grasped in the 10th grade John 1:9, 1 John 1:9, that if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just and will forgive us of our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And that just sunk deep. And I realized that it doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't matter if I can muster the self-control to stop doing what I'm doing. I'm forgiven now, and I'm forgiven forever.
Yeah.
As I trust in him and begin to turn my life over to him. And that's repentance. That's turning your life over to God.
Yeah.
God, you're my boss with all my faults. Here I am. And I did that, and it was life-changing. Then I started to, of course, take the Bible very literally. And then I heard challenges about the Bible that evolution has towards creation and Genesis. And so these concern me. And so I think I picked up a simple chick track, Big Daddy, and then there was a couple others that showed some basic apologetics about creation science that contradicted evolution and really encouraged me that I was on the right track. I was believing something accurate. And then, of course, the chick track is kind of the total tip of the iceberg, because there are wonderful organizations like Answers in Genesis, Creation Ministries International, and Institute for Creation Research, and Dr. Baugh's ministry, if you, right over here. By the way, is this forward or backwards? Can you read this normally?
Yeah, I can read it normally. It's fine.
Okay, good. Because to me, it's mirror image. And Creation Ministries Creation Evidence Museum, Dr. Baugh's ministry. Those things really touched my heart. And it basically is very similar to this Delk print here, I saw something very similar to it. A guy had a human footprint from Tuba City, Arizona. It kind of looked like a big cowboy boot print, but it was in Jurassic strata, and he showed me that there were dinosaur footprints in that same strata in Tuba City. In this case, they were Dilophosaurs, the double
The crest.
crested theropod dinosaur, kind of like one of these with a double crest on the head. And just like you see these three-toed footprints of a theropod dinosaur, and then you have a human footprint. Well, I did see the human footprint. It had a moccasin though. And the dinosaur footprint was in a different section, but it was in the same layer.
Yeah.
And it showed me that the millions of years interpretation of the fossil levels is erroneous. We don't have to accept it. Evolutionists would really just assume chiseling this out with a chisel and making sure it doesn't get the light of day than to allow the general public to know about these things.
Yeah.
And they really are knee-jerk reaction is just to deny it, to explain it away as an anomaly or as a forgery. And this is just one, there's many.
Sure.
Trackways, the human handprint in Cretaceous strata. Somebody fell in mud and had two hands in the mud. Dr. Baugh has that print in the Creation Evidence Museum. And it shows you that, as the Bible says, if you look at the genealogies, you only get a few thousand years out of all world history to the beginning of creation to today. And that really does fit the facts.
Yeah.
And when you just let these kind of facts speak for themselves, then it isn't a surprise that maybe there could be dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and plesiosaurs living around the world today. Well, when a friend named Jeremy Aldany brought me that stone in a creation meeting and showed me that it was from Jurassic strata, oh man, that fired me up. But that just kind of got me interested in the Congo and the Mokele Mbembe, Lekile Bembe reports, as well as Loch Ness Monster, things like that. But then in about the year 2000, Dr. Baugh had gone to Papua New Guinea looking for living pterosaurs, and I heard about it about the year 2000. And I was like, no way, this is too good to be true.
It's kind of how I felt.
I just said, well, why not dig up some phone numbers? So I started to network and I called him. And he says, oh yeah, all right, we've been there. And he said, hey, you got to contact my friend Bill Gibbons up in Canada. He's much more abreast to it than even I am. And even though Dr. Baugh had been there and had done the initial research, Bill Gibbons was doing the frontline research for Mokele Mbembe in Cameroon and Gabon and Congo. So anyway, that fired me up. I really would never plan to go or anything like that. But in 2002, Paul Nation, who had kind of taken the baton from Carl Baugh, Dr. Baugh was pretty much, I got to build a museum. I really don't have much time for the field work that I want to do. And, he's pushing 70 at the time. So yeah, it made sense. He had to really focus on what he could do. So Paul Nation was an ostrich, what would you call it? He incubated and raised ostrich eggs all the way to 300-pound lethal adult male birds. And he bred them and was a part of the ranching of ostriches. So Dr. Baugh hand selected him in case they were to capture a living pterosaur in Papua New Guinea or had eggs or young. He would be the one to look after them and raise them and care for them, and get, as he got permission from the government to make captures. He actually got, that's amazing. He got permission from the Papua New Guinea government. I believe it was in Wow. They had a biological center there of some kind. and he got the person there to give him permits to capture 6 eggs, young or adults. And the government wanted 2. If they were to capture any, the government wanted 2, and then they could take up to 4 more back with them. So he had procured a route home to get them through quarantine in Hawaii and eventually to Texas. And it never came to be, he never caught one, but just to show you that the people know the creatures are real, and they were willing to do that. And that was pretty, that was like some favor from the Lord.
Yeah. And I
Yes.
gotta ask this question then. Okay. The fact that they were willing to allow you to bring back eggs potentially or something like that tells me they believe that these things are still alive. That's huge.
It is. It's completely huge. So I think those permits are pretty much expired because the whole government has turned over since then. And honestly, we're just trying to find a spot where we think it's feasible to get long-term hours and hours and hours of footage. And whether we have to capture for that, we're open, but however we can do it, we need to get those hours and hours of high quality, high definition footage of this creature. So there's really no doubt that people would have from all different angles and lighting and everything.
Sure.
That's the ultimate goal, because you and I can talk about it and we'll encourage believers, but for the non-believers, they need more tangible proof.
Oh yeah.
And so I respect that. And I just want to get that. That's my goal, is to get that tangible proof for them, that so they can really say, there it is,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been speaking with Rex Yappy. I'm sure you're familiar with him because he lives in PNG. This is a totally different subject. We'll get there eventually. But I just want to bring up the fact that I've been trying to reach out to his government because I wanted to really bring him down here and give a presentation, because I've been actually helping to support his research as much as I can as funding, because he doesn't have a lot of funding down there, but the dollar goes further, a lot further. So every once in a while, we'll try our best to get a camera or something to him. It's really difficult because if you try to mail something from Oregon to PNG, I think they wanted $200 just for a small box. So it adds up fast. But his government,
I remember spending about $300 on a package just to get it to Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, it's tough.
More than I was sending the content,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's good information. I love hearing that. I mean, the start and everything, how it just begins. And it's interesting. I hadn't heard of that gentleman before. I've heard of Pollination. Of course, as soon as I watched Monster Quest, his name came up, your name came up, and then we had, we'll hold off. I was going to bring up the lights.
Call his name. Jim Bloom is the missionary in Papua New Guinea, and if you watch the video clip in the Monster Quest video, you'll see him flying, but you'll just see the back of his head as he's got the headphones on and he's flying, and you can see the mountain in Tawa where they had made some sightings.
Yeah,
and he's flying around that area.
How do you spell Tawa? Is that
T-A-W-A?
Okay, that's what I thought. Tawa. Garth, I'm going to get ready to break down the dam, as you once put it. I know we just touched.
It hasn't already started.
I know that you have. You mentioned a presentation and things like that. I want to give you complete time, the complete floor. I'm going to try my best not to interfere. This subject just excites me because, like I said, I love these creatures, and it's funny because when I was growing up, they were not my favorite. Everybody's favorite was that amazing T-Rex.
Yeah.
For me, it was probably maybe a Deinonychus or a Triceratops, a good trike. But these things have really captured my imagination ever since I went to Washington.
Well, for me, once I found out the favorite animal right now.
Yep. Okay, so I'm not going to interfere. I'll try not to. I'm just going to let you go.
To make me co-host?
Well, okay. I'll just go ahead and make you co-host.
Screen sharing has stopped as the window. Okay. All right. I clicked on the wrong window to share with you. So let me double check, make sure I'm doing this field drawing. Yeah, just be patient.
No
we're in
problem.
the track.
It's okay. I'm still trying to figure out Zoom as well. I've never really used it before, but I'm getting the hang of it.
Now you can see it now, right?
I can, yeah.
Okay. Now, if you're at home and you want to see this presentation done right, dim the lights down real low, because all this research, almost 100% of it is done in the dark. I'd say about 98% is done in the dark. So this is Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of what, when you see the beginning of that cartoon, you get a good feel for what we have to go through to do this kind of research. I can't think of the boy's name, but he gets out there with his little catapult
Hiccup
launcher. And he's looking at a pitch black sky, looking for a black flying creature. And I even had to adjust this a little bit just so you could see Toothless. I mean, you can see his eyes pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And I also like the fact that they put that shooting star streaking in the background. That's a little more appropriate than they probably even realized. So this is I didn't really adjust this for this audience completely, but this is for a general audience. But we are in Genesis Park and in the Creation Evidence Museum. We're trying to show evidence for living pterosaurs in this presentation, and we really want to to help people to question evolution, which is man's based interpretation of data. Whereas we want them to really consider creation, which is based on biblical authority, and really it's based on God's observations that he had written down by faithful men. So let's talk about the mystery of dinosaurs, and we can add to that pterosaurs, plesiosaurs. Let's just call them Mesozoic creatures, God made all the animals, including dinosaurs and pterosaurs, with man in 6 days. And in the Masoretic, it's about 4004 BC, and in the Septuagint, it's about another 1,500 years more. But either way, you get less than 10,000 years. All the animals were created with man. And all land-based animal kinds got on Noah's Ark. And check it out, they all got off Noah's Ark too. Now, every country has accounts of dragons coexisting with man.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what Genesis Park is all about, is to research that and give the physical evidence for it. But
Absolutely.
Historically speaking, every country has accounts of dragons coexisting with man in their ancient histories. Now, an alarming number of those accounts do include dinosaurs or dragons being killed by humans. And when people ask the question, what happened to the dinosaurs? Why are they dead and buried in the ground like they are? They don't want to put these two facts together. Yes, the dinosaurs died in Noah's flood, but they also survived thereafter. So we have, for dinosaurs, plesiosaurs, and pterosaurs, was simply dragon. Now, in the Bible, only dinosaurs and plesiosaurs have that title of dragon, whether it's a land dragon or water dragon. Now, the flying dragons don't get that title in Scripture. They have the title fiery flying serpent or seraphim. But throughout history, though, the flying reptiles were put together with all the dragon kinds. If you're a large, dominant reptile, you got the term dragon, whether you walked, swam, or flew throughout history. And these dragons, or we know them as dinosaurs and pterosaurs, have been reported throughout all history and are still being reported in remote locations today. Now, just a real quickie, this is definitely homemade, computer-generated pictures here. These are not my photographs. It's stuff I downloaded off of the internet.
Sure.
So nothing I've drawn. But we have the short-tailed variety, And the first short-tailed pterosaur ever found was called pterodactyl, which means ptero is flying and dactyl is wing. So you got this flying finger or wing finger. And it did not have a long tail. So every pterodactyl that was found with a short tail thereafter, with a few exceptions, is called a pterodactyloid, short-tailed pterosaur. And then the long-tailed pterosaurs, the first long-tailed pterosaur ever found was a Rhamphorhynchus, and therefore all the long-tailed pterosaurs thereafter were called Rhamphorhynchoids.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So use the term Rhamphorhynchid or pterodactylid. Those also fit, but whether you go coid or id, it's the same thing. It's optional. And Rhamphorhynchoids, again, they have the long tails. With a significant exception is the Aragnathoides. The Aragnathoides is a frog-faced, flat-faced, relatively flat-faced pterosaur that has all the configuration of a Rhamphorhynchoid pterosaur except the tail. And there's other things about pterodactyloids and Rhamphorhynchoids that I can differentiate for you. Basically, the wing fingers. There we go. This is a model of a Rhamphorhynchoid. And a Rhamphorhynchoid pterosaur, if you look, has their claws about a third of the way out on their wing. I'm sorry, can you see me?
I don't think I can. I can see on my end, but I don't think the audience can see that on their end.
Hold on just for a second. Let me stop here. And okay,
there we go.
Share for a second so you can see me. Now, can you see me?
I can.
So on this pterodactyloid, I'm sorry, this is a Rhamphorhynchoid. They have a long tail, right? They have a claws on their wings go a third of the way out. And the other 2/3 is all wing finger. They have, it's not these fingers, it's these fingers. It's the thumb, the pointer finger, and the middle finger makes up these finger. And in this case, it would be like in this fashion here.
Okay.
So that's how their wings are configured. But the pterodactyloid with the short tail, their wing fingers are in the middle of the wing. So they're 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
This is 1/3, 2/3. So that's the big difference when you're looking at them. If you see claws, where are the claws on the wings? That will tell me, is it a pterodactyloid or a Rhamphorhynchoid?
I see.
Whether you see a tail or not.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a moment here, just to clarify for some people. I know that when we speak of pterodactyl, that's more like referring to a genus of species, as most paleontologists would say, that the correct term is pterosaur for standards today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people, they're not well-versed, so they just say pterodactyl for everything. And
yeah.
We understand what they're getting at.
Well, it's basically to communicate. Because when people think pterodactyl, they're going to think dinosaur-like bird, even though that's not the right phrase.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So they might say dinosaur bird or, flying dinosaur. Okay, we know what they're talking about. They're wrong, but we know what they're getting at. They're talking about pterosaur.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now, Garth, can they see you right now? Seeing that you're still in control, they can still see you, right? Okay, good. Just making sure. Please proceed.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen.
Okay.
And there it is. Got my screen?
There we go.
All right, good. I'm going to go full screen. So next one. Now, it's kind of interesting. Isaiah uses the term fiery flying serpent when he is describing pterosaurs. He says specifically about the Assyrian attack on Israel that Israel was wicked and they would not repent from their sins. They would not stop worshiping Baal. They would not stop offering their children to idols. And they were very, very wicked. And the Assyrian army is coming to destroy Israel. And Israel says, they get this great idea. Hey, let's go give Egypt, it's a pretty good sized country, very good sized army. Let's give them a whole bunch of treasure, money, and buy their allegiance or their alliance, and they can fight with us, and then we'll be able to stand up against the Assyrians so they don't destroy us. Isaiah prophesies in the name of the Lord. He says, basically, you're going to go down to Egypt and you're going to bring loads of treasure on the backs of camels and donkeys. And you're going to go into a land, speaking of Egypt, it says a land of lions, vipers, and fiery flying serpents.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you're going to give all that treasure to them. And you know what? They're not even going to help you. And Assyria is still going to destroy you. But that's the background to that. But what did he call Egypt? He called it a land of lions, vipers, and fiery flying serpents. Isaiah uses that term to describe what sounds like, if you just let it speak for itself, a flying, burning one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's applied to reptiles. This is the same term that's used for those creatures that bit the children of Israel in the wilderness and caused them to die. And Moses had to pray, and God says, put one of those seraphs on a pole and lift it up. And if people will look at it in faith, when they get bit, they will not die. And so it's a reptile. It's a flying reptile, and something to do with burning. Don't quite get that.
Yeah.
But Isaiah chapter, and I believe it's 6, has the term seraphim as well, but it applies directly to angels. These angels had multiple wings, multiple faces, and they cried out, "Holy, holy, holy, Lord God Almighty, who was and is to glory." And he says, that's the famous part where Isaiah was getting his commission. Who will go for us? And who shall we send? Notice how God says we, and he's not talking about the angels either. He says, who will go for us? Who shall we send? Well, it's one of the awesome passages. There's about 6 of them in Scripture where God speaks in the plural of himself, and it seems to indicate a Trinity. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Who will go for us? So Isaiah speaks up and says, "Here I am, send me." But he uses the same word. Now, Isaiah, growing up from a young man to the day he spoke these words, probably saw the seraphim pterosaurs first, and they lit up and they shined. And so when he sees these angels, what are they? They're lit up, they're shining, and they're flying. He uses the same term. So why do seraphim, why is it applied to both angels and pterosaurs? Well, they both fly and they both shine. Now, we didn't discover that pterosaurs shine for quite a while. Dr. Baugh went in the early 1990s. It was then that the natives explained to him that a daytime sighting is rare, and you see them mostly at night because they shine. Now, is there evidence in history that pterosaurs existed in Egypt? Well, this was found in a University of Chicago Press book dated 1948 called Kingship and the Gods, written by Henry Frankfurt. And he uncovered hieroglyphs in Egypt that say this. The 2 hieroglyphic hymns used for the coronation of the pharaoh found within the pyramids mention the serif. Notice it's spelled a little different.
It is.
But when you come from a different language, it doesn't really matter how it looks and the letters used. It's really the sound, because that's what it comes down to. And serif in Hebrew is, well, when we transliterate it into English, is S-A-R-E-P-H, serif.
Yep.
But again, you wouldn't see it, you wouldn't hear it any different, though it's spelled a little different. It says this. Again, this is a hieroglyphic hymn about a coronation of a pharaoh. It says, the doors of the horizon are opened. Their bolts are slipped. He comes to thee, O red crown. He comes to thee, O fiery seraph. He comes to you, O great one. He comes to you, O magician. These are lofty words. These are good words to the Egyptian culture that's writing this.
Mm-hmm.
O red crown, O Inu, O great one, O magician, O fiery seraph. Let there be a terror of me like terror of thee. And let there be fear of me like fear of thee. Now, Jake, how many times have you seen these shapes here in front of you?
Many, many times.
Okay. Are you familiar, before you started your research, are you familiar with the Ankh, that cross with the circle on the top?
I am, yes. It has actually been depicted in, well, not just on carvings, but it's also been used by music artists growing up.
Yeah. Tons of them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how about the middle one there, the Jed? Are you familiar with that one?
No, not that one.
Okay, now that's kind of an interesting one. It's based on, it's like the Ankh is the symbol of eternal life for the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians.
Uh-huh.
The Jed is the symbol for stability and strength, and long term of a rule. And that is based on the sacrum, the fused vertebra of an ox or an ark, and the first of the lumbar vertebra. And that's what you could actually see, the 4 vertebral processes of the lumbar vertebra are depicted there on top of the fused portions of the sacral vertebra.
Yeah.
It's not just the backbone, it's the strongest part of the backbone. This is a person or a concept that is the strength of the group. This is the one that holds everybody together. This is the one that keeps stability to everyone and your movement.
Mm-hmm.
And the next one over is called the Was scepter, W-A-S scepter. It always has the little double fork at the bottom, and at the top, it has that unique shape. And if you zoom in, I'll try to zoom in here for you. You can see, did it zoom in for you?
It did.
Okay. You can see the shape kind of looks like a pterosaur head. Let's go to the next one. And here again, we have Osiris, I believe, the falcon-headed god.
Mm-hmm.
The staff that he holds. It's a long staff version of the Was scepter. And here's a pharaoh or a priest also having a Was scepter. And look at the head crest on the Was scepter. It has some kind of skin flap below it, maybe like a patagium of skin for possible flight dynamics. I don't know.
Hmm.
Again, it's very similar here. Again, you could, within the
Look at that one.
margin of error, what do you call it? Our artistic license. There you go. Within artistic license, you can see this is pretty much the same thing. And there's a lot of high detail here, isn't there?
There is.
Yeah. And again, each one is unique. Each one is slightly different than the other if you look carefully at them. And the Was scepter is held by a arms attached to the Ankh.
Yeah.
So eternal life holding double power. The wasp scepter is the symbol for power. Now let me shrink it back down and I'll advance. So here's just again, within artistic license, you can see what they're trying to depict. A very simplified version in the bottom center, or a very high detailed version in the top center, and variations all around.
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, I was going to say, it kind of almost looks like it represents two kinds of animals here, or creatures. Some would probably argue that what you're seeing is reminiscent of a coyote, but I don't see that. I see some sort of bird-like creature. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Especially when we understand the pteranodon type pterosaur. This seems to really fit a similar species to that kind of a creature.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the pteranodon had the opposite ratio of beak to head crest lengths. The pterodactyl, I'm saying them wrong. Forgive me. The pteranodon has a longer beak and a shorter head crest. It's just opposite of this. So it's not the same, but it does seem to be a possible pterosaur. Now, believe me, Egyptologists with a knee-jerk reaction will reject that right off the bat.
I'm sure of it.
It does seem to fit the historical narrative that I've been painting for you, that I've been showing you from the historical descriptions of the hieroglyphic hymn and the biblical narrative of the description of fiery flying serpents with the name of seraphim. So, well, let's get into it more. More angles will come up here.
Okay.
A quick disclaimer: the image there with Moses holding the staff and the rhamphorhynchoid on the pole comes from a website that I believe is designed to make fun of our research.
Okay.
Very serious, what you call it, antagonistic fun.
Sure.
They don't like us. And so they kind of have, at first, you look at these images and say, oh, that's actually kind of good description. But when you get to the salvation and you go through their website and you get to the part about coming to Christ, they get blasphemous.
Okay.
They get blasphemous. And it's pretty nasty. And they hook up this little scary screech noise, and it's terrible.
That's too bad.
I give a disclaimer on that, but I do like the art. This is great art. It depicts it well. In fact, you wouldn't have to have that bronze depiction. The tail wouldn't have to go up. It could go straight down, and it would match the shape of what? Not just a pole, but a cross on a pole. Very interesting, huh?
Yeah, it is. And can I chime in on this one just for a moment? When I see that, I spent about maybe 10 or 11 years in the medical field, so I constantly saw the medical symbol displayed on walls, which looked like a serpent with wings. So most people think, oh, that's just a snake with wings. That's not a pterosaur, nothing like that. So are we implying that they've changed the design over the last hundreds of years? That maybe it wasn't the original?
I think the term serpent, which is in the Bible, in the Old English, I should say in the Old English specifically, is the term for not snake. It's a term for reptile. It's a generic term. It does not mean snake, any more than saying reptile means snake. You could say serpent, and you are referring to everything from turtles and rhamphorhynchoids and dinosaurs and lizards and snakes, the whole gamut of reptiles.
Yeah.
You're not referring to a snake, but in modern day, they relate the term serpent to snake only. Almost universally, they really are getting away from the understanding that serpent means reptile in the Old English.
Yeah. And
that's what I need you to keep in mind when you're reading the word serpent in scripture.
Yeah.
It's reptile, it's not snake.
He brings up a good point, folks. That's something you have to keep in mind, really keep in mind, because I hate to say this for everybody's listening, but if you read your King James Version, it clearly says fiery flying serpent in the book of Isaiah. Okay. But with the New International Version and the New American Standard, they removed pieces of that because they didn't understand what that meant. And that's why I always like to tell people, read your King James Version instead, because it actually is going to be more accurate. But more,
I agree with that. They do have the term dragon about 24 times in the Bible, and it's well preserved in the older versions, the King James Version, all the way up to even Webster's 200 years later. It still had the word dragon.
Yeah.
Isaiah 91:13, the young lion and the dragon you shall trample under feet. Micah 1:8, I will make a wailing like the dragons. And Job 40 speaks of behemoth as eating grass like an ox. And the interesting thing about behemoth, it's basically a sauropod dinosaur, long neck, long tail, super giant body, right?
yeah.
It says, Job, behold now. Now that's Old English for Job, look over there right this second.
Yeah.
Behemoth, go look at him right now, not in your concept in your head. No, behold now, behemoth, which I have made as well as you. He eats grass like an ox. He has strength in the bones of his loins like iron and bronze.
Mm-hmm.
He has a tail that he swings like a cedar tree, and he can walk across a raging river and not be alarmed. He is the chief of the ways of God. Now, that's an old idiom, meaning he's the biggest land animal I've ever made.
Right.
Well, that's very significant. And
Very clear.
But my point was the word dragon is there, but not in the newer versions because they shy away from it. Why? Probably because they're unfortunately influenced by millions of years in evolution and the concepts that all these dinosaurs are supposed to have died out millions of years ago.
Yeah, I concur.
So let's talk about this fiery flying serpent that Moses was commanded to make and put on a pole. He said, the serpent on a pole, check this out, it may have been a pterosaur, which is, think about it, a combination of sin symbolized by a serpent, yet a shining heavenly being. So only one was made, and it was lifted up on a pole so that Israel might be saved from the deadly bites, again, the symbol of sin, if they were to look in faith. And its wings would fit perfectly outstretched on a cross. So just imagine a little cross member on a tall pole. They could lift it up, and no matter where you were, you look towards the center of camp, there is that bronze serpent.
As a reminder.
And type of Christ. Because John in chapter 3 said about Moses, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. And then he says, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever looks upon him, believes in him, right, should not perish, but have everlasting life. And it's a type and a shadow of Christ to come. Now, this is one of my most favorite things about the pterosaur research, historically speaking. Okay, Jake, have you heard of Pilate, who killed Jesus and had him crucified?
Absolutely.
Do you know where he retired?
No.
Retired in Switzerland, believe it or not. And they even named this mountain after him, Mount Pilatus. And the nickname of the mountain is the Mountain of Dragons. Christopher Shoreham was a priest, a Christian priest, who was basically going out and doing a devotion in the evening. Beautiful mountain and lake there and night sky, and it was a warm night, you know. So he wrote this in his own words, Christopher Shoreham. It says, in a warm night in 1619, While contemplating the serenity of the heavens, I saw a shining dragon of great size in front of Mount Pilatus, Switzerland. Moving rapidly in an agitated way, seen flying across the lake, it was of a large size, with a long tail, a long neck, and a reptile's head, and ferocious gaping jaws. And this is a ski resort at Mount Pilatus today, and look at their logo. Pretty cool, huh?
Interesting.
And if you notice, those wings are relatively small for that large body.
Sure.
I'd like to talk about that maybe another time, why those wings in ancient dragon depictions are relatively small. And continuing with Christopher Shorham's quote, as the dragon flew, it was like iron struck in a forge when pressed together that scatters sparks. At first, I thought it was a meteor from what I saw. Now here I have here's a man forging metal together. He's hitting two pieces of hot metal together, and they are scattering sparks. And I take that back. It might not be two pieces of metal. If you're hardening metal by hammering it, it'll scatter sparks like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at the sparks coming off the side of that hammer hit in the process of forging. That is what the creature had coming behind it. And it's exactly very similar to what we are seeing even today. Let me shrink this down. Now, this is the completion of Christopher Shorham's quote. But after I diligently observed it alone, I understood it was indeed a dragon from the motion of the limbs of the entire body. I quote the source there, the book that it came from. So when you look at this with the kind of composite of all that we understand pterosaurs to look like, I have made that general shape and drawn that picture, and then added to it the bioluminescent starry trail behind it, kind of like a meteor. And believe me, this is what we're seeing. Not necessarily all in one shot. Sometimes we just see the bioluminescent trail behind it, and we don't see the creature itself. Other times we see the creature, and other times it flashes, other times it glows, other times it moves across the sky glowing. And when we put them all together, we get what Christopher Shorham saw in 1619. Now, this is the man who really got the ball rolling for modern pterosaur research. He was 19 years old. He was in World War II as a soldier. His name is Dwayne Hodgkinson.
Mm-hmm.
In 1944, August 19th, he looked up and saw an amazing sight while he was basically doing a little sightseeing while there was some lull in the fighting. He got permission to go look at some villages. And he told, years later, he told Stan, I don't know his first name, but Brower is his last name. It was one of his best friends. And he told Dr. Lang, Dr. Walter Lang was a itinerant creation evangelist who would go around the United States and just talk about creation science and evangelize people for Christ, lead them to the Lord. If they had questions about atheism or agnosticism or evolution, he would deal with those questions and then get them back into the Bible, believing the Bible, and then leading them to Christ. That's
Sure.
what Dr. Lang did. And so many of us are following in his footsteps.
I see.
And because he was itinerant, he would literally drive all over the United States. When he met Brower, Hodgkinson's friend who knew the story, he met him in, I believe, Montana. And when he got to Texas, where Dr. Baugh was, he told Dr. Baugh. And then Dr. Baugh was very interested, so he called Dwayne Hodgkinson, verified the story for himself, and then flew to Papua New Guinea to do the investigation personally. When I interviewed Dwayne Hodgkinson, he was 79 years old. That interview is on YouTube, and it has over 300,000 hits.
Yeah, seen it.
So he was 79 years old. I think he lived to about 86, 87 years old. So thank God he lived as long as he did for us to get that interview.
Yeah, agree.
One of the best interviews. I mean, I was really blessed because Paul Nation, I went to do a little tour of the United States with my family and kind of made it a creation tour, you know. So I visited Paul Nation and Dr. Baugh, and then I visited some family. And then on the way back, Paul Nation says, make sure you go and interview Dwayne Hodgkinson in Livingston, Montana. It's in the lower part of Montana, just above Yellowstone. It's in the Paradise Valley that the river system feeds the Yellowstone National Park.
Yeah.
And it was a great interview, fun, a lot of awesome time there. Oh, he was a plane pilot, of course. He was a soldier. While he was in the military at this time, he was not a military pilot. He became a military pilot after the war. He did planes after the surrender of Japan. He flew for the United States Army at that time, but he was not a pilot at this time. But he was a pilot, though. He had a plane in the United States, a Piper Tri-Pacer with a 20-foot wingspan. Now, just to give everybody a little heads up as to where Papua New Guinea is, you go to the land down under, on the other side of the equator, and there you have Australia. The Cape of York is that pointy section of Australia, and it points directly to Papua New Guinea. And they think they're only separated by less than 100 miles. Like the closest is probably like 20 miles.
Yeah.
And Papua New Guinea is the right half of New Guinea. So here is the right half of New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, and it also includes other islands. On the north, you see it says Admiralty Island, but it's part of the Manus Island chain, and it is a province. So you can see, let me blow it up a little bit here, that word Manus below the island there.
I see it.
That's the province name. And then you have the big island of New Britain, and that's cut in two. It's East New Britain and West New Britain. And then you have New Ireland, is that long, skinny one on the right.
Yeah.
And then they don't show it, but they also have the northernmost island of the Solomon Islands is it'll come to me in a second. It's also part of Papua New Guinea. So let's go over the components to the sighting of Dwayne Hodgkinson's story. He went up to do some sightseeing, and here he's holding a woman's comb that they handmade out of bamboo. They gave it to him as a souvenir. He also brought back a grass skirt. Hopefully it was a spare one and not one they just took off, right? And he brought back some other things, and he had them there to show me. And there's a giant pig or a big boar in the story, and there's these large fire ants, army ants. They're about 1 inch long.
Yeah.
And they were red like this one, they were black. And then, of course, you have the creature itself, the pterosaur. So this is a PowerPoint slide I put together. I hodgepodged this together from different clippings off the internet. I asked Dwayne Hodgkinson, did this look like what you experienced? He says, yes, it did, except it was a little more open, a little less jungly. There was jungle, it was far away, and there was less underbrush here. It was a grassy field, a very unique thing to see in this jungly area, but it was a grassy field about anywhere from a foot to 2 feet tall grass. And then the jungle was beyond that.
Okay.
Well, we came across a stump, he said, and there were large army ants on it. And these were aggressive. If you got close to them or you blew on them, they would rear back at you and open up their claws and their pinchers, and they were ready to fight you. You know,
aggressive.
Really impressed by these giant ants. And so all of a sudden, they heard a boar crashing through the jungle. They didn't know it was a boar. They just heard a crashing noise. And they turned around. This is what happened. I'm going to let the animation play now.
Okay.
They turn their heads and they see this creature flying up out of the grass. And then the boar that had caused the noise that spooked the creature ran across the grass field. But the creature, the flying creature, turned back around and flew right over their heads. Now, I assumed it was gliding, but he told me it was flapping the whole time.
Okay.
It took, I think he said something like 6 to 10 steps, running steps to get airborne. And then it went up and over the trees, and they were scratching their heads. They didn't have a clue as to what it was at that time. They thought it was a giant bird of some kind. But once it flew around and flew pretty much right over their heads, he could see that giant head crest, and the wings, he said, were as long as his Piper tripacer.
Huge.
29 feet.
Oh my goodness.
Or take, but it was huge.
Yep.
He says it had a tail, but he was uncertain if it had a diamond-shaped flange or anything like that. He just doesn't remember it having one, because he says all his attention was on that giant head and head crest.
The mass. Yep. Excellent animation, by the way.
Oh, that took about a week to put together.
It always does.
I learned as I was going. Now, I told you about Steve Sconce. He was a missionary in Papua New Guinea, working for the SIL missionary, the Wycliffe Bible missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
And he was there for a year and a half, and he saw pterosaurs 8 different times in tandem groups of 2 or 3 every time he saw the pterosaurs. He said their call was like a scratching, like a scratching on a chalkboard, but a lower pitch. And one time when he heard the cry, the screeching noise of the creature, his wife was right there, Crystal. So she was able to see it one time when he pointed it out to her. Marvin is his dad, and Harriet is his mother. They came for Harriet's birthday. I believe it was in the, I wish I'd have written my years down here. I have it in my field notes. They came for Harriet's birthday. They stayed a week. Harriet and I have the same birthday, May 8th, so that's how I can remember that much of it. And they took a helicopter, paid for by the organization, because Marvin was, he was an officer in the missionary organization. He held some kind of rank. I'm using military terms, and I don't mean to do that.
Yeah, that's okay.
Basically, he was hired to go to different missions and evaluate and troubleshoot for problems and issues they're having. And so he used that to get to be able to visit his son on his wife's birthday. Marvin saw 3 of them in tandem groups, one right behind each other, in a tandem group, soaring down the river valley about 100 yards apart. So one would pretty much go across the whole sky, and then the next one would come and right behind it, and then that was kind of disappear, and then the next one would come, the same flight path.
Okay.
Other times they were closer, but they were always right behind each other. He said he could see the muscles under the skin and that they were very stout. He specifically mentioned the neck muscles, and as they were flying, you could see, you know, a very strong muscles involved with this creature, both with his wings and chest, but his neck specifically.
Okay.
Holding that large flying head. And he did die. I said it this when I made this slide that he had lymphoma, but he has passed away since I interviewed him.
Oh, that's too bad.
His wife is still alive, and Harriet had the most amazing sighting. She was absolutely terrified when she walked along a trail, and she self-admittedly, she's a heavy woman.
Mm-hmm.
And she did not want to hurt herself. She just wanted to get from point A to point B. And all of a sudden, as she's walking down this trail towards one of the houses, she sees this on her right side, flying very slowly right next to her. And I think I wrote it down here. Yeah, 30 feet out from her.
Oh, man.
He's on kind of a crest of a ridge top of mountains. And as she's walking on this crest, you know, what's straight out to your right, 30 feet away, is midair. I mean, it's got a lot of slope, so you're up in the air. There must have been some kind of updraft, because this creature is basically flying like a 4 or 5 miles an hour at the max.
Okay.
She's walking fast. She's walking, and watched it out of the corner of her eye as she is absolutely terrified as she goes about 30 or 40 feet to get to the door and get in that house. She says that was her total aim. Get inside. I don't want to be around this large creature. She says the wingspan was about 12 feet, and the head crest about 6 to 8 inches long, and all the dimensions of a pteranodon matched.
Yeah.
She did not say she saw any claws. The claws must have been folded flat against the wing, but that head crest and the beak had the very similar dimensions as a pteranodon, a bigger beak, smaller head crest. And I don't know if she said she could tell if it had feet or not. And that might be understandable because she was so scared, and just seeing that head and the large wings might
Sure.
seeing the rest. Anyway, I thought that was amazing.
It is amazing.
Said the description of each person was similar to an 8 to 12 foot pteranodon. The one that was the most different was Marvin, the dad. He said that the beak, he thought, may have had like a spoonbill to it, like a spoonbill bird, has that spoon shape at the end. So these are things I just have to write down, and I just have to add them up and see if I can make sense of them in time.
Yeah.
Right now, that's an anomaly to me. Now, in 2006, Paul Nation, my good friend down in Texas, went to Papua New Guinea, and he went to deep in the inland where we'd had reports that these creatures were seen. We've had intel from Jacob Keepus, the pastor there that we trained when we were there in 2004. So when he would go around Papua New Guinea and do evangelism, preaching, miles and miles away from every other place, right? He'd just go maybe 50 miles to this church and another 100 miles to this church, another 50 miles to this church, and he'd go all around Papua New Guinea. He would ask about the creature because he knew what to ask about now.
Mm-hmm.
And he said at one time he saw 5 at once flying around this mountain. So Paul Nation got some funding. Jonathan Whitcomb wrote his first book and asked some rich guy, thank the Lord for him, asked if Jonathan Whitcomb would like to go back to Papua New Guinea and he'd fund it. And Jonathan Whitcomb goes, well, no, I'm not able to go out anymore, but I know somebody who can. So he got Paul Nation funded and went out there. And he videotaped these two lights. Now, if you look in the upper right of my slide, you'll see the little two lights. See, it's November 2006 at the top, and to the right, you'll see two little lights there.
Yep.
That is the size that he actually saw. And then we put up and put it in the center of this slide. So that's what we have. Now, the next slide will be where he actually saw it in the daylight.
Okay.
Saw two Ropen lights in the daylight. Remember, the little lights up there on the top, apply them to this, the low point on this ridge top. Right there in the middle is where we saw it, those two lights.
Yeah.
Those are big, big trees up there. Those little nubs are actually trees with probably 3 feet diameter trunks. And that's how we were able to estimate the size of those lights.
Okay.
Somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 of a mile away from where he's taking the picture. But this is the exact spot he saw the lights. Now, if you listen in Monster Quest, you'll hear him describe it.
Yeah.
The Flying Monsters episode, season 3, episode 15 of Monster Quest.
Mm-hmm.
Says he sees like a match lit, like somebody with a lighter up there, just barely visible, right? He says all of a sudden, it's like somebody threw a gallon of gas on that lighter and it just blew up. It just was a big light all of a sudden. And like a large fire. Like, you know, when you think of a campfire, it would be a large campfire. And so he lifts up his video camera and starts videotaping, and that's when he gets these lights. Another one did the same thing right next to it. The first one was the left one, and then the right one was that little bitty flicker of a match, and then boom, it just lit up super bright and got much bigger. And then he watched as the left one slowly died out and the right one slowly died out. And it's a total of about 15 plus seconds of video footage that he got. So thank God he got the first video footage.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, one of the things you have to do in doing your field research is you have to begin to understand what shooting stars do and how they act and what are shooting stars and how is the nature of a meteor shower. So let's talk about that.
Okay.
Shooting stars come from a radiant, and it's just a point in the sky as all the stars across the sky move across the sky, just like the sun does, just like the moon does. All the stars move across the sky in a very similar way. And shooting stars, that's a misnomer, of course. They're actually a meteor. It's some grain of rock or sand or even water, ice, is zipping through our atmosphere. It lights up and causes plasma and irradiates into a nice bright display, as you're familiar with when you look at shooting stars. But I'm struggling to talk.
Sure.
But the radiant is where shooting stars will originate from. And so each of these pictures, can you see my cursor?
I can.
Okay, this is the Perseids. It's from Perseus constellation, and the meteor shower near Perseus constellation, they call Perseids, the Perseids meteor shower.
Okay.
And so all these meteors originate from a point in the sky, which is by Perseus, the constellation. And the same here is the Lyrids are originating from Lyra. And from this angle, you can actually see they literally come from top and bottom and all around Lyra. Again, Leo, the Leonids originate from Leo and they radiate in all directions. So what do we know? What can we say about meteors? A meteor will always radiate away from its fellow meteors that come from the same radiant.
Mm-hmm.
They'll never go towards each other. So if you see two meteors coming towards each other, they come from different radiants, right? So that would be a usual thing to see. If you were to, it just be very unusual to see two meteors at the same time coming towards each other.
Yeah.
But we know about meteors in general that they are commonly burning up as they come into our atmosphere, anywhere from 30 all the way up to 60 miles in the sky. As our atmosphere gets thicker, they burn brighter and brighter, and they just burn up and disintegrate.
Mm-hmm.
Whew, that was a long slide. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So now let me set you up for this. We are out doing our field reconnaissance in a brand new area. I have my friend, fellow cryptozoologist Scott Norman with me, and David Wetzel with me. We all converge on this one area. And we're excited because we've heard from the local landowner that there are lights and flying creatures that all seem to be pterosaur activity. So we're investigating.
Okay.
So I'm looking up in the sky, and I see this, Jake. I'm sorry. I see this. And it went from one end of the sky to the other about that speed. I did not see a flying creature in front of it, but I saw that. Okay. And it was big. The diameter of the bioluminescent trail was something along 6 inches.
Okay.
It was a big diameter. It was hefty. So this creature that's making it is leaving this large bioluminescence behind it. And for those of you doubters out there, let's just call it luminescence, but it's a starry trail, right?
Okay.
Then I turn around, and what am I going to do? I'm going to look at Scott in the face and I say, Scott, you're not going to believe this. I just saw this. And then I see Scott's face light up. I go, Scott, what'd you see? The first words out of his mouth was, that can't be a pterosaur. You know, the first, anyway, what did he see? Let me get it back up. Okay. This is what he sees. Did you notice what I saw? I saw that, and then he saw that. These quote unquote meteors are going towards each other.
Yeah.
They're coming from opposite directions. They did not come from the same radiance. And yet they were configured identical, because when I compared his notes to my notes, they're the same.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, his face lights up. I said, what did you see? And then he told me he saw this flying bioluminescent trail zipping from the opposite direction I saw it come from.
Yeah.
So that was fascinating. And I saw his face light up, and that was amazing. And that turns out I will see again and again somebody else's face lighting up while I was looking in the wrong direction.
I want to chime in on this one, okay? Yeah, I remember listening to both of you, the late Scott Norman, because I know he passed away later.
Yeah.
You know, the beautiful thing is that he got to witness that before he passed. You know, that's an amazing thing. And I'm sure...
drawing of Scott Norman right there by Bill Rebsamen.
Let's take a look here. Oh, there we go. Nicely. Nice. Yeah, and it was great. I'm glad he was able to have that experience. I could tell when he was talking and you were both together. I remember doing the video about that when I did the Ropen of Washington State. He was just enthralled, and he was so happy. He had that look of joy on his face. that he said he was the most skeptical on the trip. And then something happened. Now, for a lot of people who are watching, they're probably going to bring up the UFO thing. They'll say, okay, what makes you think that was a pterosaur? It could have been just a UFO, but Garth has been explaining this for a good amount of time here about the difference between meteors and talking about the fiery flying serpents as we get into it. And as you're seeing, this is where it's pointing to. I know for a lot of you, it's going to be hard to take in, but you see what we're getting at. And I just wanted to make sure that the audience knows the difference between the UFO activity and this, because I don't think much UFO activity stems from something that's almost like a meteor, but these things are going sideways, making course directions and things like that.
Yeah. It's another interesting thing. In a book called The Two Roads of Papua, Evelyn Cheeseman was an entomologist. She was an insect doctor. She studied insects in Papua New Guinea in the 1930s. She saw these lights flying at night several ridges over, and she could not figure out what they were, but she wrote it down in her book. Jonathan Whitcomb found that somehow. I have bought my own copy of that book, which is out of print, and I'm really thankful that we have that information historically documenting that these lights have been around a long time.
Yeah.
And they're not UFOs. The people in Papua New Guinea, their default is what? Spirits. Now, Westerners will see the same thing. Their default is what? If they're not Christian, they might think it's a UFO.
Right. Let me read.
Oh, go ahead.
Let's go into something here real fast. I'm not sure how much more presentation do you have? How much time do you think you still need on the presentation?
We're about halfway through.
Halfway. Okay. Can I ask questions about the Ropens now? Is now a good time to start asking about that?
Sure.
Okay. Let's tackle some of it. We already explored what we believe it to be. A lot of people believe them to be nocturnal, but they have been seen during the day. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. The bioluminescence, which most people who study pterosaurs, and there are very, very little amounts of people who study pterosaurs who are focused on them. I only know maybe like 3 people. I once knew a gentleman who lived in John Day, who was working on John Day fossil, and then he actually started working on pterosaurs for a short amount of time.
Right.
And then I know that, Garth, you've actually had a chance to study pterosaur fossils too, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So that makes Garth another person, which is great.
Well,
So
this is the book I started off with. If you want to just
we got stuck. Uh-oh. Did we run out of time, Garth? I think we did. One sec. Let me see if I can fix this.
about that. Can you hear me?
I can. Okay, I think we're still good. You were showing us a book.
Okay, you didn't see the book?
I saw a little bit of it. I think you faded out for a moment.
The
Okay.
Illustrated Encyclopedia of Pterosaurs by Peter Wellenhoffen.
Okay.
Just a groundbreaking pterosaur book. And secular pterosaurologists and paleontologists really have it down as far as the angles of the bones, the shapes of the bones, how they fit together.
Yeah.
They are really, really good.
Mhm.
We creationists don't have any problem with that whatsoever. We just believe they're still around today. And but this will help us to get a clue as to how they might behave, how they might move and look.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people believe that there's no
Oh,
fossil.
you froze again. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I know I know that the free Zoom is probably about I think you get maybe 2 or 3 hours. So we'll see how we do. Okay. Well, we'll figure it out. Okay. So paleontologists would say that there is no evidence of the Ropen because they haven't found a skeleton, a complete skeleton of a Ropen with long tail and head crest. Long tail and head crest, they say, do not exist. However, I believe that's just a preconceived notion that they found every stinking skeleton out there, which they have not. And the fact there's only 15 to 20 paleontologists devoted to pterosaur fossils and to pterosaurs themselves tells us how very little we still know. We're still working on it. We're still trying to get the answers. But there'll be a lot of people who believe they know just about anything there is to know about pterosaurs. The other point that the other important part is the bioluminescence, the glowing orb effect. Now, some would say that's just something coming from the neighboring country in Australia or some sort of a ricochet. But that's just not the case, as Garth is clearly pointing out. Again, they'll say there's no evidence, which was pointed out in Monster Quest, which is what was his name? Martel? David Martel?
David Martel.
David Martel. He was with you. He's a paleontologist on that trip with you. Now, he was saying there's no evidence whatsoever to support that pterosaurs have an ability to glow. But if you were to find a skeleton of like a bombardier beetle, which is an amazing little critter that just kind of defies evolution. Not defines, defies. Because of its amazing ability to shoot out some sort of toxin to just wipe out its enemy.
Yeah.
See, I tend to think that pterosaurs have these capabilities. It's not been discovered yet in that part. I think we're getting closer. Maybe even a poisonous ability that they may have too if they were to bite down and dispense a venom like Sinornithosaurus, but that's not a pterosaurian. So there you got a lot of opposition to the Ropens in PNG, to the Indava, to the core. There's also the one known as the core. But I think the natives, when they come out and they say, hey, we've seen something, and then you got missionaries out there who've been out there for a long time, and they're the ones who are actually probably coming back and saying, we're reporting this, and this is how it probably gets started. Excited.
Well, I think when you begin to look at the nature of the sightings and that what we have documented, it just flows. It starts to fit hand in glove and dovetails together that these are still alive. They do shine. They fly. They're very elusive, and they use that light to blend in. They don't just shine to show themselves. Most of the time, they use the light to blend in with the background lighting, and they just disappear.
Yeah.
Stunningly so. They are masters of stealth.
Yeah, I think when people say they're not intelligent, I think that's an absolute lie. A lot of birds are very intelligent. As I'd mentioned in the past with other people, that for years they had to study how to eat what it was they were after. Like if they knew a poisonous frog was out there, they had to flip them over and eat from their bellies because otherwise they'd be poisoned. So they had to figure it out. They're amazing about figuring and problem solving. So what's to say that pterosaurs can't problem solve as well, or how to evade, or how to communicate? And this is one of those things on how they communicate with each other, is with their bioluminescence.
Yeah.
A lot of these things are just kind of, if you're new to it, folks, it's mind-blowing because you never heard of these things before, and now you are. You're getting the full scope of it. And there's so much more that we're going to learn as we continue to seek truth here. But I would say, please keep an open mind, especially when we hear about missionaries who were in the field. Now, the skeptics are going to say this, and I've heard this from people like Trey the Explainer. If you've ever seen his videos on YouTube, he has made it known that he believes that missionaries are bribing people to say things in order to sway creation. Okay. So in other words, if someone says they've seen a creature, oh, hey, well, tell you what, we'll build your house for you or your hut for you if you say it was this creature instead. Or the more and more times you go out to PNG, you're going to the same location, and you're just going to have people come forward and say, hey, we know these missionaries. They give us stuff if we say this. Yeah, I don't believe that's the case at all. What's your thought on that, Garth?
Oh, absolutely not. The people that we see could be seen for the very first time, and they'll describe the same kind of creature that the last village described, and they don't know each other.
Right.
And now I've seen interviews where they ask leading questions, like when I'm an EMT, I don't ask somebody, does your chest hurt? You're having difficulty breathing? Because all they could say is what? Yes. And then now I got to work them up and I got to do all kinds of stuff. No, I say, are you having any pain? Oh yeah? Where? And let them tell
Right. Let them tell the story.
me, and don't lead them to say something. I do the same thing in this research. I say, do you have any creatures that fly at night that don't have any feathers? Something like that. And they say, oh yeah, we have bats. I think, okay. You got any other kind of creatures? And then they have to volunteer it. I can't tell them this, and this. They have to say, what this creature looks like. Yeah. And then that'll verify that, we're on the right track.
Okay.
But over and over again, you give them silhouettes. If I can show you my silhouette page and hold that up for them and say, what does the creature kind of look like? And you give them these bats and birds and pterodactyloids and rhamphorhynchoids. And you ask them what that creature looked like, and they'll point it out. And then so many times, nearly 100% of the time, it's going to be a rhamphorhynchoid or a pterodactyl. It's not going to be a bird or a bat. Yeah.
And is it still true that they are grave robbers, or was that for a certain amount of time until they got a little bit more, the people started realizing that their people are being taken out and then just put them in hard caskets or put them in concrete? I heard about that.
I've heard one story of where a funeral was interrupted and the village at night used their torches and scared the creature off. Okay. But it landed and wanted to get into the casket. Mm. We kind of had an idea of what's going on. The body's starting to smell, and it's the warm, hot tropics, and it's time to bury our beloved relative. Yeah. So they scared it away and quickly buried it deep. And I've heard that they put white rock or white sand on it to make it brighter, to kind of keep the creature from discouraging the creature from coming back with it.
Okay, so they
how prevalent that is. I've heard of it in a handful of places. Yeah. For the most part, the natives pretty much point to seafood and carrion. Okay. They food and carrion, and then we have had a field researcher get a positive result from using lab mice. She put lab mice out, and one got eaten.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Just so everybody knows, the name Ropen means demon flyer or grave robber. Is that correct?
Well, no. Yes and no. It's commonly portrayed that way. The word Ropen means demonic flyer.
Ah, that's a lot different.
Not demon flyer specific. That particular language group of people of what a Ropen is a flying creature that is a sorcerer. This is a witch or warlock, they would call it a shaman, that transforms him or herself. Now, they tend to look at it as a female most of the time. That a female witch transforms herself and flies, and that's what the creature is. And when she goes there, she's going to curse people, and somebody's going to die in the village. It's very, very common. If you see a Ropen light, somebody will die in the village. Okay. So I think this is discouraging us from people coming forward and telling us that they saw one.
Yeah. Now, I remember Jonathan was touching bases on something about this, because skeptics would say that this is just dealt in superstition, but their fear has to stem from somewhere. It's kind of like the Native Americans or Native Canadians who feel the same way about the Wendigo. They're afraid, sometimes they're afraid to talk about it. Yeah. And these people sound like they're afraid to talk about Ropens as well, because they're in fear of what it would do. Yeah. But it's not based in superstition completely. I mean, I think there's maybe a hint of it, but most people that you guys have spoken to are very sincere. And the first thing they speak of is, oh yeah, I saw it. It's a creature, a flying creature. They're very adamant that they're seeing a flying creature.
Several have seen the shape of the creature, and many more have seen the lights. And there's a handful of them that haven't seen the creature.
Yep.
Just weren't looking at the right place at the right time. And, in Herat, where we first went, in Umboy Island, part of the Siassi province island chain, the people there would see it about once a month.
Okay.
And that means they would notice it once a month. It would be so obvious that, there's one. Yeah.
Okay.
Continue?
I think what we're going to do is I think we should probably break it up now. I would be more than willing to continue. I know that there's still quite a bit. We're halfway done with the slide.
Well, let me go back here and let's take a look at the sighting there. Well, you can see got quite a few more. Okay. We have, it's more like a little more than a third into it. I could skip several, but this is a very important sighting here.
Yeah, I agree.
This is Scott Norman's sighting in 2007.
Yeah.
And
wingspan of 10 feet.
Would you like to stop and restart? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I'm thinking we can pick it up another time.
Another day. Okay. Well, we'll pick it up here then, because this is a whole other ball of wax.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And it's been extremely fascinating because I'm hearing more and more what I've gathered on my own versus what you guys have done in the field. I think it's very important. I haven't been to PNG. Of course, I've been to many states here in the U.S., and it's been nice to be able to hear about the accounts. But I think we'll wait till after this next part to get into that, because the California part is another huge issue. I remember one gentleman saying, you don't need to go to PNG. We got them in California. So they're being seen in Arkansas. They're being seen Washington State, California, worldwide. Basically, they've been seen in the United Kingdom as well. So there's so much more to tackle right now, but I know we'll just go ahead and stop here. We'll give it let it just sink in. I know for a lot of people who are going to be viewing, they're going to let us sink in too, but it's getting exciting, and there's so much more we're going to continue to venture into. But I think this is a good stopping point, and then we'll take it up another day. Are you still good on Sundays to talk?
Yeah, I will be working probably the next 2 Sundays, but
okay. Let's plan. I tell you what, I'll shoot you a message a little bit later, and we'll just figure out a perfect time and for the schedule, and we'll take it up from there. And again,
absolutely.
I can't tell you how blessed I am just to be able to speak to you for the first time. I mean, I got to talk to you yesterday on the phone while I was driving to Corvallis, but still, it has been. I've been looking forward to this, and this is the beautiful thing about social media. You can reach out to some people that you thought you'd never be able to have a chance to talk to, and here it is. It's happening.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Garth, and I look forward to part 2 in the week or so, or maybe even 2 weeks, whatever is best for your schedule. Yeah. Well, we greatly appreciate
the rate we're going.
Yeah,
we're going to wind up about part 5 to finish.
Probably, but that's good, because this is why I made this channel. I'm so fascinated by pterosaurs. They are the #1 subject for this network, and then you have a chance to reach out and win some people to the Lord. That's important. So we're doing the right thing. Yeah. God bless all the work that you've done, all your research. It is a huge blessing, and I look forward to next time.
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate that.
I appreciate you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it, and then I'll reach out to you a little bit later today, and we'll figure out the schedule.
All right.
All right. You have a good Sunday now, sir. Well, like I said, we had a lot to cover here, and this will be done in parts due to the large but great info that Garth has been involved with and gathered over the years. We are extremely grateful for his time. So if this has not piqued your interest in living pterosaurs, I'm not sure what will. But they are alive, guys. Yes, indeed. We have more to come on the network this year, with 2 more creature features coming in July and October, so stay tuned. For the first time ever, we'll get to see Frank Shaw's story. Just a little bit of a hint there. But before I go, most important, seek the truth. Keep your eyes on the sky. God bless every one of you on the other side of this screen. See you next time.